every Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m.
Okay. That was odd.
I actually ran that one earlier.
Did you?
I hate this board, man. God. Ready? Go. Yeah.
Hey, Sacramento. We were having a couple technical difficulties, but we're back. What the heck? It's 2020. Anything goes this year. You're listening to 97.5 FM KDEE. I am Agent Key. And if you're watching us, we are on Facebook Live at Selling Sacramento on the radio. We are also on YouTube on Key Matthews on my YouTube page, Periscope, Key Matthews Agent Key, and Twitter. We are live on all 4 social network platforms this day. I want to jump right into our show, and I want to first start with the Breonna Taylor decision. Are we looking at the letter of the law or the spirit of the law? We already know in these United States of America that the laws were not written for us. The laws are written lawfully with the ability to trap us. In the spirit of the law, many people who don't look like us get off every day. In the spirit of the law, if you have enough money, you can escape anything. But in the letter of the law, if they want to indict you, they will, and they can do it lawfully. In the letter of the law, if they want to release you and find you innocent, they can, and they can do it lawfully. Who is the they that we're referencing? It is election season, everyone. These individuals get voted into office. It is election season. It is the time to vote them out of office for some of them. For the others, their time will be up in another couple of years, and you get an opportunity to vote them out of office. This is a time for us to not look at things along political lines. We have to look at things along the lines of humanity. This is not a Democrat, Republican issue. This is an issue of humanity and what is right. Breonna Taylor was gunned down in her home, in the privacy of her own home, where her boyfriend, fiance, was a registered gun owner. That situation could have been any one of us. Any one of us. There's no way to paint this picture. Even though they tried to get her fiance to say that she had been dealing drugs. Remember the letter of the law? If they tried to get him to say that, how many other times have individuals been able to say something like that and get taken down by the letter of the law? I want to jump right into the show today, and I started with Breonna Taylor. Number one, because I'm mad. And I'm saying mad calmly, but I'm mad. But the other thing that I've learned is that anger does not produce the righteousness of God. And there's a bigger plan at hand. In 2020, there are 2 roads going on right now. There's a road of destruction happening, and there's a road of construction happening. And you get to decide which road you want to be on. If you lean into your anger, you're headed down the road of destruction. But if you lean into the bigger picture, there's a revolution happening. There is big change happening. If you lean into truth and not a political agenda, you are on the path to a road of construction. Our show today is called Segregation, Redlining, and the Housing Crisis, the Misdiagnosis. I want to introduce to you all today my special guest, Dr. Jesus Hernandez. And Dr. Jesus Hernandez specializes in, I just get so excited just thinking about what he does, because it was a couple of years ago that I discovered a book that actually talked about redlining, block busting, things of those natures that have shaped the landscape of housing as we see it today. And this book I've shared with you all before has nothing on what Dr. Jesus Hernandez has been doing. And so I want to read you his bio. The research of urban sociologist, he is an urban sociologist, is dedicated to understanding social problems that affect community cohesion, neighborhood development, and quality of life. His work highlights the importance of equitable urban and environmental planning, housing finance, and public policy in building effective neighborhood-based economic development strategies. Their urgency to connect neighborhoods to policy planning and funding resulted in JCH Research. It's his consulting firm that he created to provide flexibility in connecting academic research and macro-scale urban policy to the on-ground practice of sustainability and climate change at the neighborhood scale. His research approach prioritizes the neighborhood as an important unit of analysis and emphasizes neighborhood-scale economic development and revitalization in ways that directly address racial, spatial wealth gaps and disparate public investment patterns. I know it sounds like a lot, y'all, but we're about to break it down, so don't worry, hang on. His current research centers on using neighborhood-based energy and housing planning to implement climate change and sustainable community strategies in neighborhoods experiencing long-term divestment and poverty, i.e., New Helvetia. Yes, we're going there today. In addition to several research and academic publications on the effects of public policy on race and neighborhood stability, he's a frequent speaker at fair housing, legal, and academic conferences and university classrooms around the country. He also assists nonprofit agencies with research on housing, neighborhood-based energy planning, healthcare, and sustainable community strategies. His highlight presentations include the Open Research Conference on Globalization in Tokyo, Japan, the International Conference on Urban Justice and Sustainability in Vancouver, British Columbia, the United Nations Council on Women in New York, the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, D.C., and testifying before the National Commission on Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity regarding predatory lending practices. Dr. Hernandez, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for the invite.
We are about to get down.
We're working around you now.
You know, I've had a conversation with Dr. Hernandez before the show. We've talked a couple times, and I am just very pleased with his passion for what you do. Tell us a little bit also about your connection to the COLI Coalition.
My research has been on using Sacramento as the case study to demonstrate how racial antagonisms have reconstructed our cities for the last 100 years. So Sacramento right now is all over the map across the nation because of this type of work. And the COLI Coalition found me and tracked me down and said, hey, we're doing this over here. What do you think? And I said, oh, I'm all in. Because it was about civil rights. And a big portion of my work is fair housing. And so civil rights in Sacramento is of the utmost importance now. And the site of New Helvetia was where it all started in Sacramento. Without the kinds of things Nat Colley was doing in Sacramento at that time, you and I would not be living where we live.
Right.
I lived 2 blocks, 3 blocks from the mayor.
Right.
There's no way that would have happened
Without his
without
efforts.
that effort.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you did. Before we get into this, I'm going to take a break because I just want to use all this time so that you can just share and everyone can hear the insight that you have. We are going to talk about this misdiagnosis. We're going to talk about what the result is, how we fix it, and when we come back, we're going to jump right in. Everyone, you're listening to 97.5 FM KDEE. I am Agent Key, and we will be right back. I looked at the time and I saw it was 1:10. I was like, oh, I don't want to jump in. So when we come back, we'll just have more time.
Right?
Okay.
The way you did, that's what I was talking about earlier. That was perfect the way you did.
Okay.
You felt yourself gearing up. You was like, wait a minute.
I know. I started like,
out the way.
hey, Mike, how you doing? Hi, Ronald. The indictment has nothing to do with exactly. It had nothing to do with her.
No.
Truth, destruction versus construction. Yes. Thank you, Larry. Yep. You're an awesome woman. Ronnie, stop trying to get a date.
What's wrong with that? Ronnie,
Stop it, Ronnie.
Ronnie, throw your shot in,
I'm sorry. Thank you, Ronnie. I appreciate the compliment. They saying shoot your shot.
That's right. Shoot your shot, Ronnie.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you for tuning in. You know I'm only playing with you, Ronnie.
I'm on your side, Ronnie. Go for it. Really?
Oh my gosh. Woo.
But you're doing good.
Woo.
Just started.
We got to get it all. And so I just need, yes. So when we come back, the misdiagnosis, I'll talk about how you had did the show with Death
Right.
React.
So what's that
What was said.
Okay.
And then
we go.
Yeah. And then we'll take off.
The passion is good, man. Believe it. And I have a problem if I wouldn't believe it. I tell you.
The effort is not getting mad.
Right. That's right.
You don't get mad at all this stuff. Something wrong with you.
Something wrong with you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with you.
Yeah. But it's what you do with that anger. You know, you get mad, but you can't go in a direction that's going to destroy. You got to build. You got to use your anger to build.
Yeah.
And it all shows up what we do is real estate brokers.
Yeah.
This is how I found out about all this stuff. When I started out, all this subprime rate sheets were crossing my fax machine.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, oh my God, what's some of this stuff?
And it didn't
It would go
sit
to the
right
black
in your,
churches.
yeah.
You know, brokers would go to the black churches and get all those loans. They would go. So if you see where all those loans are, they went to the bad side of town. They went to that X.
Right.
And that's where all the foreclosures hit. And so now you see those properties.
You're going to have to say that again.
It'll come out.
You're like, it's on repeat. It's
Let's go there.
Yeah.
And that's how you got Oak Park.
Yeah.
So that's where I was born in Oak Park. But Oak Park didn't look the way it did now.
Right.
It didn't have any specialty beer or street tacos that you got to go inside to get there. It was a different place.
Yeah. Oak Park has transformed.
Grew up,
Four
where
times?
the Panthers were feeding us. Okay?
Yeah.
That's when I grew up there.
Okay.
So you see how it changed. Aggie Square, all that stuff. So get me started.
Move.
Yeah, it's that height. The height is the tough
Hey,
part.
Sacramento, we are back. You're listening to 97.5 FM KDEE. I am Agent Key. And our show today, Segregation, Redlining, and the Housing Crisis, the Misdiagnosis. There has been a misdiagnosis. My special guest today is Dr. Jesus Hernandez. He is an urban sociologist, and he's going to be bringing us tons of information to help us understand where we are today, to help us get a clear understanding even of this Breonna Taylor decision. Once this show is over, my hope is that we will have a much more firm foundation and grip on a real reality, our real Black experience in America, and specifically right here in Sacramento. We need to understand that most of the time that we get information, it's already been shaped and decided. We need to be a part of the process before we get the information. versus having bones thrown at us to satisfy us, like in the Breonna Taylor decision today, like in the New Helvetia, oh, they're not going to be displaced bone. We're going to make sure that there's affordable. Well, there's something more but beyond affordable housing that we require and deserve. How about equitable opportunities for generational wealth building, home ownership? How about being a part of that bigger plan, which I'm getting slightly ahead of myself, that the city of Sacramento is not talking about, but that they're dealing with just New Helvetia. New Helvetia is one piece of a bigger puzzle that the city of Sacramento is not talking about, that they are not allowing citizens of New Helvetia to be a part of, to gain that equitable growth from. But we're going to break it down for you today. Dr. Hernandez, you were on Cap Radio in an interview with Beth Ruyak. And that episode was called The X That Marks Sacramento's Social Ills, How Decades-Old Policy Racially Divided the City. She asked your thoughts on that show about the mayor's plan to help with the homeless crisis. And you responded that they were misdiagnosing the patient. I loved that response. I love that analogy, and I love where you went from there. Let's start with your analogy.
So when you go to the doctor does a workup of what he or she assesses you as being wrong with you. They look at, the symptoms, are you bleeding? Are you cut? Are you mentally ill? What's going on here? And then they look at that patient history. And then they create this diagnostic vision for wellness and treatment. So what if we take that patient, we take that same model, and we use the neighborhood where we live as the patient, as the unit of analysis, as the nerdy sociologist would say. So now we look at the neighborhood as our patient. Let's take them through the diagnostics. How does our neighborhood present ourselves? Let's look at New Helvetia. Mm-hmm. What do you know? No employment, lack of education, no transit, no wealth accumulation, no home ownership, no health care, mm-hmm. no STEM programs for the schools. And they are segregated for the most part, because that in years ago was the edge of town. Mm-hmm. And that's why New Helvetia is there, not because it was a vibrant spot that everybody wanted to be. Right. Broadway was the edge of town.
They were intentionally displaced.
So they were put right there for a specific reason.
And now the city wants it back.
So now if we look at this history of our patient, now it becomes relevant. Like, okay, what are the issues facing these folks? And how do we create a treatment plan to alleviate that illness? Mm-hmm. How do we create better access to schools, and schools with the kind of programming that they need to excel? Mm-hmm. How do we make sure that they have health care that's available to them? Worry of whether they can afford it or not. Right. Or we don't have to worry if the doctor takes Medi-Cal patients. Mm-hmm. Or we don't have to worry if they have access to transportation that can take them to get tested for COVID. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have all of these barriers facing these places that are segregated. And if we understand, if we do the diagnostics on our patient neighborhood, we will see that this is a cumulative trauma that has been for decades and decades in what I call intergenerational trauma. Not one generation, but from one generation to the next. And the history of our city explains all of this stuff. So when I start talking about that X, and everybody in Sacramento knows this X. Mm-hmm. It comes from North Highlands, Del Paso Heights, all the way to Oak Park and Meadowview. Mm-hmm. And it goes from north to south. And everybody knows that location is full of race, poverty, environmental hazards, low education, every social ill you can measure by this.
So one line of the X is from north to south.
North to south. And where? West to east, we see all the places that were initially they started with race covenants, racially restricted covenants that only white folks were allowed to live there.
Mm-hmm.
And so as that moved towards from the point now, which is Greenhaven, all the way to Granite Bay, you will see this line of race covenants that basically splits Sacramento in half.
Mm-hmm.
And this was started during the 1930s, during the Roosevelt administration, when we started to change the way we do housing finance, to make housing finance cheaper than rent. But the problem at that time is the way to qualify for that financing means you had to have a race covenant on the property,
Right.
which basically excluded all minorities from ownership and access to financing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is how you see East Sacramento, McKinley Park, Curtis Park, Arden Fair, Carmichael, and all the way down the line, so that you will see where these covenants were placed.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where money goes.
And these restrictions that you're referring to, these for local government, federal government mandated restrictions. These were policies that were put in place by our government.
Into our policy for underwriting government loans.
Right.
So now you'll see that there is this massive financial infrastructure that is solely set up for white home ownership across the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The magnitude of that infrastructure, we still don't realize.
Right.
Because it's still in place.
How many years of this type of behavior are we looking at?
So we look
lawful, the letter
lawful
of the law.
behavior, right? Okay, so if we look in the early 1900s, this is when race covenants were really starting to make their dent in society, because this is when real estate agents were first starting to organize, the National Association of Real Estate Boards. And through that, and they also began to organize the way we started doing land development into big housing developments that we see now. And so these developers, to increase the value of their development, started putting these race covenants. And these race covenants were actually, board of realtors were giving templates to their affiliates across the United States, along with a code of ethics. It's saying you cannot introduce those colored people into our places, right?
Yeah.
And so this was built into the way we do real estate. And then the Depression comes in, and all of these leaders from the National Association of Real Estate Boards become the administrators for FHA. And of course, they bring their race covenants with them, and they're redlining with them.
And this is why you refer to them as the gatekeepers.
Yes. So that's really important. So in Sacramento, you'll see the original redlining maps in downtown, the West End. And most of just about every minority in town was living there. 80% of minorities in town were living there. And so when you have those covenants there, you cannot make investments into the land. Right. Because you just can't qualify for loans.
They won't fund.
So you see all these properties imploding, white owners splitting their houses into 3 or 4 units to collect rents, and they didn't have to do any repairs. And of course, when you don't run money through a neighborhood, it implodes, which is what happened in the West End, making it a prime target for redevelopment, government-sponsored redevelopment. And Sacramento was the place where tax increment financing was born, where we used the tax dollars of the future value of the property to fund what we're doing. So we use these state-sponsored financial techniques to displace thousands and thousands of people from downtown. Japantown had their own banks, their own schools, their own churches. If you look at churches today, you will see Black churches downtown that have not left the area, right? You will see Latino churches, you will see Asian churches, you'll even see a mosque down there. Okay, these were the foundations for these neighborhoods. And so we had basically split up all of these ethnic enclaves. And because of redevelopment and the freeways, we need to get to the freeways. And because we split up these ethnic enclaves that had their rich social and economic support systems in place, now they leave because of redevelopment, and they have to go to a place where there's no race covenants, which is why you see this new configuration from Del Paso Heights, Oak Park, Glen Elder,
neighborhoods where they didn't want to live.
They
Whites
didn't-
didn't want
they
to
didn't
live.
have any
so
covenants.
Blacks had to go.
So
Could
there's
only
no
go
covenants
to
there.
areas.
And now we see a new
The
phase of
segregation.
redlining because appraisals were dependent upon the color of our skin up until like 1976, 78, right around there.
Mhm.
So all that time, minorities were not able to get loans. When my parents got a loan for our first house in Oak Park, it didn't go through the bank. We went to the owner, did a contract.
Wow.
Right. And so a land sales contract was what they called them back then. So I would pay you every month, landowner,
Yeah, so
the
it's very
rent.
similar to own
And
finance.
as long as I didn't miss any payments,
But you couldn't get it financed through the bank.
couldn't get it financed through the bank. And that happened a lot in places like Oak Park and El Paso Heights.
So we're talking about 70-something years of this
Oh, more.
before the law became,
Well,
before the law was written to make it not fair to do this.
a big change happened in the 60s because the civil rights movement started and we saw riots happen, it's burning, commercial properties burning.
Mhm.
Now you see changes. Now you see FHA opening up to neighborhoods of color.
Was that 68?
68.
So that was almost 70 years. But in 68 years, you got a mindset, generational. And we look at generations from the 20-year perspective. Great grandma.
That's why I call it intergenerational.
Great-grandma.
It goes from
Everybody's
one generation to the
mindset
next. Yes.
is Black people, less than human, lazy. These are the things that America said about us.
Well, that basically that comes down to how we talk about race.
Mm-hmm.
Race is not something that's biological. Race is a process of creating distance
Right.
between groups.
Mm-hmm.
The truth, what are the mechanisms we use to create that distance?
And that's where
That's
the
legal.
laws come into place. So the point that I want to get at is that you've got this mindset now for almost 70 years when it comes to housing. You create this law in 68 that says it's unfair, but it's kind of too late. Because why? The mindset is there, right?
So right around 70, 75, Sacramento's cut into stone.
Mm-hmm.
We know what's happening north and south, east to west.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then another phase of redlining comes in for this new segregated space from north to south.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see how there was even less home ownership in these places.
Right.
Okay. And these became the places where it became stigmatized.
Yeah.
You don't want to go near those colored people.
Right.
They're evil, they're bad, they're dangerous.
There's gangs,
riots, drugs,
mm-hmm.
and all that stuff. And so when you label these places as unsafe places to go, nobody invests there. Banks don't invest there.
Right.
Businesses don't invest there.
Right.
And the businesses that we create to serve our folks are not able to access investment dollars.
The fact that we can sit here today and mentally identify on a map, not mentally, we can physically identify on the map where the Black neighborhoods are.
Yes. It's very easy to do.
And if we were to draw a line, it would create the X that you're referring to.
Yes. So if I'm out shopping for property and I pull up my little phone app, my little real estate app, and it says the demographics of the neighborhood, it tells me where to buy and where not to buy.
Right. And you could legally, without using the word Black people live
Race,
here.
anything.
You could legally according to the law, you could legally create policies and put systems in place that disenfranchise Blacks, that disenfranchise minorities. And so it continues today. And so then you get people saying things like, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, I have a Black friend and he's not,
I just need to go know where they sell those bootstraps. I want me a pair. Okay.
And I get a pair of those bootstraps. Because even if you have a Black person or someone like yourself a minority that in someone else's eyes became successful, you have a testimony. It didn't come because the path was made easy for you. It didn't come because America was on your side. It came because there was a passion. It came because there was work that you did. You knew you had to be so many more times better than your colleagues, especially for Blacks. We already know if I'm in a room with 10 other white people, I'm probably more qualified than all of them because I have to always be better just to get their approval to be within their space.
I can walk in with a PhD and still be deemed not qualified.
True, true.
Happens all the time.
That's the letter of the, no, that's the spirit of the law. That's the spirit of the law we're talking about now, because then you're dealing with the good old boys network. It's like, and that's where when people get upset about equal opportunity with, there's a phrase I'm thinking of when it comes to college and being able to allow more Blacks and more minorities, and that people got upset at.
Oh, the affirmative action.
Affirmative action. And it wasn't just to allow Blacks in, doesn't matter what your grades are, doesn't matter how well you do in school. That was not what affirmative action was for. Affirmative action was for, hey, you've got somebody that's got the skill level. They've got the ability, they've got the tenacity, they did well in high school. But when you know there are only so many spaces to get into college every year, you need to allow for some of these spaces to be given to minorities. Because if you keep it within the spirit of the law and the good old boys network, they're not going to get in.
Look, this north-south geography is also dead on education. This is where we close our schools. This is a place that we can even go back to the 60s when places like Oak Park had to be desegregated by the law, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, desegregation was only one way. We moved people out of Oak Park to close that school rather than move people from East Sac to Oak Park to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing we did downtown. This is why you see all the kids at Sutter rather than the Tata Floyd from downtown. So you see these different configurations, and it's not blatant, it's colorblind, right? When we closed the schools in 2013, we closed the schools in Oak Park, we closed the schools in Franklin and South Sac, but these were the populations where your future caseload was coming. I mean, minorities, we make a lot of babies. And the average age of women is in the 30s. And if you look at places like Curtis Park and McKinley Park, where these schools were kept open without the enrollment, the average age of women was 45. So who are we planning for?
Right.
We go back to this patient.
Right.
Who's the patient that you're planning for?
Right.
Okay. And we're not planning for all patients equally.
Right.
And that's the big issue, because we can see where all of the social outcomes, what folks, the health people call social determinants of health, education, housing, employment, wealth accumulation, healthcare, and the infrastructure that connects it, like broadband and roads and light rail and things of that sort. We can map all this stuff out.
Right.
We can map where all of our public infrastructure investment dollars go, and they go nowhere near the people of poverty.
How will the city of Sacramento be receptive to information like this, where you basically throw them off their track and say, hey, that diagnosis is a misdiagnosis?
Apparently they're already receptive, right? That's all we heard. Project Prosper from the mayor's office. We're tearing, we want to look at New Helvetia as a way to bring in mixed income. The approach is all lives matter rather than those lives matter.
Right, right.
Okay, and that's where the harm is caused.
Right.
Because we can close your schools. We can move our transportation dollars somewhere else, because the big picture is important, and we support all the city.
And that to me is a facade, because if we really look at the big picture, and when you and I talked about this a little bit, the bigger picture is the downtown waterfront connecting West Sac to the downtown, bringing economic prosperity back to downtown, But there's one thing in the way.
Well, so we've always been focused on downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And downtown is a place where you had to get rid of the minorities to make it prosper.
Right.
Okay. And we've been doing that since the 50s,
Mm-hmm.
where when redevelopment hit and we moved all these just, vibrant communities away from the people they support.
Right.
And now you still see it happening today when we're talking about building the bridge from West Sacramento to Broadway. That's going to increase the transportation capacity for folks in West Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
The new suburban sprawl that's happening south of Rayleigh Field, now needs a way to get to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to use Broadway to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Create that bridge, go to Broadway. And now we're going to have all this traffic from the Disneyland effect of downtown. The
But
increased
now as they're
waterfront.
driving down there, if they've got to see something like New Helvetia, oh my God.
Well, we're going to
What does
fix
that
that.
look like? How will you fix that?
Well, let me tell you. First thing I'm going to do is build new roads that go right through New Helvetia.
But you said you aren't going to destroy New Helvetia or displace
But we're
New
not.
Helvetia. Oh, okay.
And so this is the conundrum we're looking at.
And you guys were being facetious and tongue in cheek and all of that. But this is the narrative.
So let's take a look at what we see. New Helvetia is really an important asset, but for who?
Exactly.
So on one hand, it takes care of folks who had some tough breaks in life, not only because, personal problems, whatever, but from the structure of the city and the way we move people around has placed these folks there.
Mm-hmm.
And public housing is supposed to be a temporary condition.
Right.
You come in, you get a break, and we give you supportive services so that you can get back on your feet and you move on. It's not supposed to be a lifetime there.
Right.
So if people have been there for more than 10 years, we can be sure that one, they didn't get the supportive services.
Right.
Okay. And so they're not going to get back on their feet and they're not going to be able to move.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, now the city has got all of this development going on downtown in the grid. The grid mean from the river to Broadway to Alhambra 30th,
Mm-hmm.
the freeway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the city wants this to thrive and grow. And in order to do that, people get displaced.
Right.
Now we're moving. If you can just take a guess on how many of the new high rises we've got with high density housing, the construction that's happening downtown is just enormous. And now they want to develop the waterfront and
Right.
the arena is there and everything. That creates traffic.
Right.
And I'm bringing people from West Sac. Let's not forget that.
Right.
Where are they going to go on Broadway?
Right.
Broadway's only 2 lanes.
For the city to say that they're not going to displace these people, it's very upsetting because they left that language
They did.
in the plan.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
Now we got to figure out what to do with this traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So New Helvetia becomes the space to mitigate that traffic problem because now they can cut roads through it to move people off of Broadway onto other paths so they don't get that traffic congestion there.
Are y'all
Okay.
listening to this?
Okay, so and that's even in their documents.
Mhm.
When we didn't come up with this is their
Right.
documents.
Yeah.
Okay. At the same time, the city wants to increase density in the public housing units.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do this, you're gonna have to tear down some buildings to
Right.
put that while your new streets are coming on, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And that's part of the issue. It's like if you want to increase this density and you want to bring mixed income
Mm-hmm.
under the notion that, you're going to bring richer people into the neighborhood, everybody's going to be better.
Right. Increasing density means that you're adding more people to a particular area. So where there may have only been 100 people within a perimeter, now you need to add, you increase it to 500. So that means you need to build your structures differently in order to get more people in those areas, in those spaces.
So the question I have is, if we want to increase density, and we want to increase traffic flows.
How are we going to do both?
How are you going to do that if your focus is rehabilitation?
And do we wait to see that? Because, or who gets to decide?
Well, my rehabilitation in New Helvetia is not coming for 10 years now.
That's what they say.
Being the good landlord I am, I'm going to put you down the road for 10 years. And don't worry, we got you covered.
Can down the road. But if a developer just so
But
happens
in the meantime,
to
if that property goes into stress, then I say, look, it's too far gone. We're going to have to demolish. Oh my gosh. What's going to happen? And this is the kind of mixed messages we're getting. And so, you know, when folks are saying there's all this misinformation going on, well, it's not coming from us.
Right.
We're just trying to figure out where that moving target is.
And we really need to be very clear when we look at this information. It's pretty black and white. If you have local government agencies saying, and I'm not going to call out any particular agencies, just to say that these agencies receive federal funding to say that they're working in these neighborhoods to improve their situations. You mentioned earlier that this is supposed to be temporary housing. Yet we know for a fact that there are families that have lived in New Helvetia for generations in temporary housing. And there are local governmental agencies who oversee these complexes and receive federal dollars to say that they are doing a good service toward these people. Yet we still have the lowest rate in home ownership, Black home ownership. There is zero home ownership in neighborhoods like New Helvetia because that's not what they're intended for. They're hit the hardest when it comes to situations like COVID-19. The patient is being misdiagnosed. And if we really...
So you wanted to get into COVID, by the way. It's a great segue.
Take it away.
So if we're looking at this patient again and all of the historical data for this patient history, well, we see unemployment, underemployment, service-oriented jobs, frontline work. We see obesity, asthma, cardiovascular stuff, all of the at-risk for COVID, all the indicators that put you at risk right in the line of COVID. Where are they located? Let's map this out. North-south, okay? So when we start looking at this, we know where COVID is going to hit. Where do we start testing?
Well, we didn't.
You look at the initial maps from the county, and you'll see high incidence of COVID in Folsom, and Rancho Cordova, and you know, Orangeville, places like that, because that's where the testing was.
That's where it started.
You know, we put our test site in Cal Expo, and this is another example of, you know, who gets the benefits. And then when we want to reopen the city back in, I think it was in May, when the big push was to reopen the businesses again. Well, in order to reopen, you needed to increase the number of tests you had per day to 2,300 tests per day. So which means you had to include other communities in this testing. And that's when the Black and brown communities started getting tested. And all of a sudden we said, oh my God.
The rates are super high, north to south.
And we didn't look at all those indicators that says you're at risk. It's north and south. And these things went sky high. Valley High went sky high. Del Paso Heights was sky high. Stuff was happening in Franklin. You know,
Oak Park was sky high.
Oak Park. South Oak Park.
South Oak Park in particular.
So you see that we're not really looking at the patient's history, because if we look at the patient's history, we'd have known all of these indicators for COVID were right at our doorstep from this legacy of housing discrimination and segregation.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to come back with how do we fix it? Are y'all ready for that? You're listening to 97.5 FM KDEE. I am Agent Key, And we'll be right back. We need a part 2. We need a part 2 because
we need a glass of wine. Because
oh my God,
somebody's over there getting smoked.
I just, hey everybody. Oh, hey you guys. Hi. Great show.
But she is holding it together really well.
Oh my gosh, all of these comments, you guys. I'm so sorry. We've been talking and haven't been looking at the comments. Hey Glenn. Hi Larry. Hey Miss Cat. Larry, love the way you elaborate on what's taking place and you're giving us a resolve as to how to process the information. Hey, hi Mom. I see you. You're welcome, Larry. First seek to understand. Multi-generational trauma. Yeah, that multi-generational trauma. Yeah.
Some things to confirm about. So I thank you.
Yeah, no, it's
yes. Larry said, where do they sell those bootstraps? That's right.
Yeah.
Great show, Keisha. Thank you, Miss Denisha.
Can't tell me my message.
Broader, ambiguous terms. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Always build up downtown. Right, exactly. Build up South Sac. Bomb show. You're welcome. Mm-hmm. Hey, Miss Linda. Charmaine, hi. Hey, very informative, Key and Dr. Hernandez. Thank you. Fascinating discussion today. Always eye-opening. You're very welcome, Glenn. You're welcome. Hey, you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry, y'all see me become another person.
Oh, you're just talking away.
I'm trying to keep my my tone out of the rafters. I don't want to become
right.
On the radio that don't translate well.
No, it doesn't. Sound like
so I gotta go down.
No.
I gotta pull up my Murphy Brown. Okay, guys.
The problem is talking about this and not getting mad.
Yeah.
On one hand, if you don't get mad, something's wrong with you.
Right.
On the other hand, if you do get mad, and that's those angry color people.
Right. Right.
Well, even that too. That's a narrative that was built into the whole racism thing and it has a lot to do with the trauma because when you have a traumatic experience, you process differently. You're always on the defensive. You're living a life of what do you call it? Where you're survival mode.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
When you're faced with that much trauma, so when someone's talking to you, you respond from a different area versus if you're not living in survival mode, you can process information differently when it's handed to you. You're more calm.
And what if I just speak aggressive? That don't mean I'm mad.
Well, but see, where did that come from? What if we Black people speak aggressively only here in the United States? What if?
Yeah,
that would then mean that there's probably something to the trauma that we face.
Question at the end.
Okay.
He's all ready to go. Let me in there, Coach.
Hey, you guys, we are back. Oh my goodness. It's a fabulous show today. Segregation, redlining, and the housing crisis, the misdiagnosis. My special guest today, Dr. Hernandez, Dr. Jesus Hernandez, and we have been, he's been breaking it down for us. I want to jump right back into it because we only have just a little bit of time left, but we were on the break talking about, and I'm going to jump right back into it. We were going to talk about the solution, but I also want to talk about trauma because we were just at the break talking about being angry. And when you are living a life of survival mode, and you had mentioned earlier, there's a trauma, a generational trauma that Blacks have experienced as a result of these racist policies and things that have been, put in place against us. And so when you come to me and talk to me as someone who's been traumatized, my level or my response is going to be different. It's going to be heightened. It's going to have some anger behind it because I'm living in survival mode. And here you come at me now like this. And I'm just trying to figure out how to make it to tomorrow. You're talking about something long. I can't even begin to think about life savings or, anything like that, let alone trying to buy a house. He's laughing, y'all, but I'm going to let him take it away.
So where do you want me to go? Solutions or where?
Talk a little bit about the trauma and then we'll go into solutions.
So if we look.
Am I right
assessing
trauma and correlating it with the
Yes, that's the exact terminology I use in the papers that I write. And so if we look at the instigators of trauma, is public policy. And that's directly related to housing. That's directly related to how we redevelop our inner city. That's directly related to the infrastructure investment that we put in places across the city, across the county. And so when we're looking at this, we're really looking at this colorblind way of distribution. Who gets what and why? And we can map that results by race. And in Sacramento County, we know what that geography is. It is north and it is south. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now what happens is as we need more space to move, we get places like New Helvetia. So we have community engagement and we have, our burrito parties. We give everybody some burrito or some macadamia nut cookies or a Subway sandwich and say, yes, you was here. And I check off the colored people box and say, yes, I had a lot of colored people here at the meeting.
It was community engagement. Yes, we got everybody involved.
So when we get to the time where we're presenting this to the Planning Commission, we send out to the community a 700-page document. Usually that shows up right in Christmas holiday weekend or vacation time, okay, which is what happened with New Helvetia. And so we're supposed to review this. The technical stuff that goes and understand it. And so how do neighborhoods sift through all of this? And so the first thing about fixing our neighborhoods is understanding how to protect ourselves. So when we look at documents or plans from the city, we need to ask ourselves some very simple questions. Does it help restore my neighborhood to the point where it needs to be? Does my neighborhood have economic productivity? Does it have the schools and everything like that? Does it need to be? Does it create a process of regeneration, meaning a circular economic activity where money is grown in the neighborhood and stays in the neighborhood? Does it give me resilience? Can I recover from a disaster like COVID or earthquake or something like that? And what are the mechanisms in place for my neighborhood to survive? Okay. And that's the framework we need to start looking at what these departments of the city offer us when they're talking about planning. Are they planning for my neighborhood or are they planning for development?
Right. So there is community development that benefits the people who actually live in the community, where the community is built to be, and we don't have any like that right now in Sacramento. Let's just be perfectly clear. We don't have any minority communities in Sacramento that are African American or Hispanic that are self-sustaining, where they are producing a product or income or building a thriving economy for the people who live there. Where if they choose to become homeowners, they can. Where if they choose to build businesses where the dollar circulates in that community time and time and time again, those communities don't exist. And yet that is what you're saying is the real answer.
If we just talk about how we just pass out our money, if we look at this last incident, this COVID problem, where the city is really trying to help businesses grow and thrive and recover from all this, let's look at where their money went. They had $1 million to pass out overnight. Over half of it shows up downtown in downtown grid.
That's not the north.
That's nowhere near north south. Okay, and those businesses didn't even know about this process. If we look at I think it's a government program called the initials are PPP. Those PPP forgivable loans for your businesses. We start looking at where those going. The first round of that stuff went out the door overnight. And these neighborhoods, north and south, they don't have those banking relationships to make those applications and things of that sort. They got left by the wayside on this.
We have only a minute left, and I want you to use that minute to give your best piece of advice for those listening if they want to get involved, what they can do. And I just want to add to that. So you say that is the solution for us to build self-sustaining. I'm just putting it in a word. The opposite of that, everyone, is gentrification, where local government and the city come together and decide for you.
But that's always been the case.
That's always been the case, and that's been the accepted norm, and we ain't having it no more. So take us out of here.
So the first thing is, before we move anywhere, the best argument or the best gun that you have is your vote. Get out and vote. Because the entry point to solutions is usually your local council member, your assembly member, and your president.
Right.
And if you're not voting for the right people in place, you're going to get the problems we see today.
Can I just add that also means that we need to be courageous and bold and look at the people who are sitting on our city council right now. They may need to go.
I'll have you know that was a unanimous vote on that Broadway plan.
Project. The people that are sitting on our city council, the people that are in positions of leadership, and I'm not going to call out all the different areas, we need to have the courage to vote people out who are not doing things in our favor.
So we're not understanding this urban planning process, and it's not designed for us to understand. And this whole urban planning process has been one intergenerational process of putting the knee on our necks for over 100 years.
100 years. And we can change over 100 years of damage in just 10 years or less if we implement the right policies that are going to make big change, powerful change. I want to end on that. I want to thank Dr. Jesus Hernandez. We're going to have him back, you all, because we only scratched the surface. And I want him to help us create a narrative of understanding of the urban renewal process. I want him to help us understand how we can change our own communities by our votes, by home ownership, by building businesses and having those dollars circulate in our communities. You've been listening to 97.5 FM KDEE. I am Agent Key. And remember, if you are doing what you were created to do, I will see you at the top. Until next time, bye-bye. Hey, you guys. Oh my gosh.
That was fun.
You are coming back. We're gonna have you back like quarterly. I know your schedule's super busy.
We need to talk about
solutions.
You
really have to help us create that narrative to get people.
That report I sent you.
Yes.
Part 4. Okay, that's the one.
I printed out part 4 last night just so that I could just
read that. Okay, roll that out. You need to tell people what black energy looks like, what brown energy looks like, and when you own it, you can sell it. Okay, and because everything is changing right now, our gas stations are going to be smut. Okay, there's no reason why we can't own the own energy we produce. Lighted area puts up some solar panels, microgrids, own our energy, sell it to our businesses for half the price of smut selling it to us for. There's no reason we can't do that. Those are jobs.
And we just need to know that we need to know what the options are. If somebody's already doing it somewhere,
we're working around you.
You know what?
Okay.
God help us today, Lord. This is a huge. We can do it, y'all. We can do it. We
didn't even scratch the surface.
No, we did not. There's a lot of information. There's a lot more information that we need to talk about. Hey, you guys. Okay, I just need you to smile in here because that's actually a cute pose right there. Just keep that pose because we're going to do a screenshot just like that. Smile a little bit more. There you go. Okay. Bye, you guys. We're going to get out of here. We'll see y'all next time. Yes, we're bringing him back. Okay.